Oh man, this is working perfect. We were scared. We've had a couple of hiccups. In fact, on our weekly ticket out, I actually had some of these kids try to tell me that Google Hangout sucks. That was on the ticket out. Y'all are hating. But we're going to get there. It's going to be good. We're excited to have Dr. Erica Thieman from University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. How do you say that?
Urbana.
Urbana. That Texas twang gets in the way. I add too many vowels to the thing. A fellow Big Ten school, but I'm actually just going to get out of the way. You know that I don't bring people to this class that aren't awesome. And I'm excited about what she's going to share with you as we investigate this notion of inclusion and its importance. You should know that I took opportunity to send to Dr. Thieman your weekly wonders, because you were asked, hey, what's an intervention? And I think that's not how I said it. What's an example of inclusion that could be done in school-based ag education? Kind of a preliminary thought. So I sent those to her, so she might ask you more about some of those things as you have it. Erica, I don't want to be in your way, so I'm going to step back and give it to you. The students are available and ready to ask questions as needed.
Okay, so I have until 9:30 your time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So good morning. How is everyone today?
Good.
Awesome. Well, I really enjoyed reading your weekly wonder answers. And I am going to give a shout out if that's okay, Dr. Foster.
Yes.
Okay, so Allison Balmer, you almost stole this show from me with your answer.
Hey, Allison. Everybody round of applause for Allison.
So are they able to see each other's answers?
Yes, they are.
Awesome. So I would highly encourage you guys to go check out Allison's answers. And I saw a lot of good stuff there. So if we get some time, we'll kind of go through those toward the end. So I do want to start off by saying you might be disappointed this morning. And I say that you might be disappointed because I am not going to sit here and talk to you for almost an hour about concrete strategies that you can integrate into your practice. What I will do is I will offer to go deeper than that today, because for me, inclusion is not about things you do that you can check off a list saying you do these things. Because if you do that, you can say you are being inclusive, but you are not actually being inclusive. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Can you expand on maybe an example of a practice where you say you're being inclusive, but you actually are not? Or where you've seen people do this?
I mean, you can say.
Okay, now hold on a second. That's not fair, because she's looking at some crappy webcam that I have and seeing random little small heads. So what we can do is make sure we get close enough where she can hear. Dr. Thieman will tell us, and say your name so at least she knows that.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I don't think you
Victoria.
I think that it's really easy to say that like you're inclusive and your organization is welcoming, but just because you say it, like you said, doesn't mean it's true. I mean, someone can walk into the classroom and we can all say, oh, hi, like welcome, and then just ignore them. So
Yeah.
Saying it, like you said, does not by any means mean it's true.
Excellent, Victoria. So this is truly a case where actions do speak louder than words. But there are times where we can still be acting and acting in accordance with what would be inclusivity, and we can still not be inclusive. And we'll get into that. So I want to offer you a quote that I share with all of my seniors. And I share this with my freshmen because I want them to remember it all 4 years while they're here, and I want them to remember it when they go out and teach. And I would encourage you to write this down and think on this one, because we'll revisit it toward the end. It is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I'll say that again. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You guys heard that one before? You head nods? Yeah. I'll give you a second to get that finished. So I will put the idea before you that inclusion in any group happens through changing your own beliefs and attitudes. If you have a program that is not representative of the demographics of your school, no matter what demographics you're looking at, whether it's SES or gender or ethnicity or religion, you need to examine your own biases as a teacher. And another point that I'll bring up is that giving up control has a lot to do with inclusion. So we have teachers have a control problem. What do you guys think I mean by that? Nobody wants to tackle that one?
Foster. That's all they said is my name, so I don't know really how I'm supposed to feel about that.
So when I say teachers have issues with control, I always get a lot of nervous laughter. But why is that? Do we see some, do some of us identify with that maybe?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so how does this issue with control manifest itself in teachers, especially ag teachers? What would it look like?
Well, I think it's just hard for them to, I don't want to say let go, but I think it's hard for them to let the officers take over or really run the program. It's hard for them to step back and say, you know, I'm the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts?
I think passion has a lot to do with it. Like,
Okay.
You're so passionate about like ag and growing great leaders that you let that maybe get in the way of letting somebody else's passion like flourish or grow.
I think what you're describing is issues with control. You might also be passionate, but there's ways to be passionate and not take over everything. So think about the concept of control as we work through this. So I have 5 main points that we're going to talk about. Number 1 is inclusion is needed now more than ever in our schools. Number 2 is our expectations shape the performance and behaviors of others. Number 3 is learning your own biases is essential to inclusion. Number 4 is authentic teacher and student interactions. And number 5 is strategies for relationship building. So I want to start with 2 stories. I had the opportunity the summer after my second year of teaching high school to go to Japan. It was all expenses paid. They even gave us spending money. All I had to have was a passport. And it was for almost 3 weeks. So I spent almost the entire month of June, one summer in Japan. And I was with a group of 200 teachers. It was the Fulbright Memorial Foundation trip. And what we did is we visited different communities, we did homestays, and we visited schools. And one of the most memorable experiences I have is I visited Higashi Elementary School. And so it's you know, your typical elementary school, adorable little children running around that I would never want to have to be in control of all day. Because there's 2 types of people in this world. There's elementary teachers and there's high school teachers, right? What do elementary teachers say about high school teachers? Huh?
They're crazy. I'd never want to teach high school. And then high school teachers say, elementary kids are crazy. I'd never want to teach them.
Right. I was always like, I don't want to be tying people's shoes and wiping snotty noses and helping them in the bathroom. That's not me. And the elementary teachers would always tell me, oh, I don't know how you can stand when they talk back to you. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of fun, actually. Um, so we pull up to this elementary school, or we walked up to it because you walk everywhere there. And when we got close to the elementary school, there was a welcoming committee standing outside the school. And initially, it was like 5 or 6 little kids and a couple teachers and a principal. Initially, I thought that the welcoming committee was special for the American senseis, the teachers that were visiting. Because teachers are like rock stars in Japan. It's really cool. If you ever get a chance to go, go. So I thought it was just for us. But when I got to spend the day with that school, I learned that that is something they do every single day. They have a group of students who are volunteers who are required to be out front and say hi and make sure that every person entering the building gets a welcome. What is the typical American school experience entering the school at the beginning of the day?
You just walk in.
Yeah, you just walk in. Sometimes there may be a principal or somebody standing out the door, but there's definitely not a welcoming committee waiting for you at the school, at least not in my experience here. So how does that contribute to inclusivity?
It makes people feel more welcome. Like they actually are, like they actually have a want to be there.
Yeah.
It shows people that they're noticed when they do come to school and maybe miss when they aren't there.
Absolutely. How often do our students get personally acknowledged by an adult in a school every day?
I think it depends on the student.
Okay, so talk to me about that.
I know, like in my school, like a lot, if you played sports, a lot of them got acknowledged because they were known. But if you were just, you know, like I stayed on the ag floor all day, so like I was only known because I would go and ask permission by administrators for stuff that we wanted to do. But if somebody didn't go out of their way to talk to them, most likely they're not going to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also depends on the teacher too. I know I've had teachers who do personally greet students as they come in, and others who don't do that at all. So.
Yeah, so think about what it is like to go through your daily existence as a student who is rarely acknowledged by the people who run that building. How does that make you feel?
Unwelcome.
I think you'd feel like you're just kind of on the outside looking in.
An outsider, yeah. Absolutely. So I was given some really good advice. I think it was my 2nd or 3rd year of teaching. I was at a conference and I saw a guy named, his last name was Wong. He wrote this book called The First Days of School. And he said, he challenged us to stand outside our door in between classes and greet every single student that walked through our door. And I am here to tell you that that forever changed my teaching practice. How do you think that changed my teaching practice?
I think before the students even get in the door, it kind of changes the tone of your classroom and like how they view you. You're not like a mean authority figure. You're someone who cares about them.
Absolutely. Somebody who hasn't spoken up yet. Any thoughts on how that changed my classroom?
I believe I agree with Victoria. Welcoming the students into the classroom is probably going to open them up more for idea exchange throughout the instructional period.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like, what do we like to do between classes? What do teachers like to do between classes? What was that?
Napping.
Nothing?
No, napping.
Napping. in the 3 to 5 minutes between classes, power nap.
I think most teachers like to hide behind their desk and like ignore students. And that wasn't my high school, but from other people's experiences, the teachers are like, how do I get away from these kids for a few minutes before this next class of like wild animals starts?
Yep. Or they're checking email, doing things that they really feel are urgent. And I would argue there's nothing more urgent than greeting every single student before they walk into your room. One of the things you can do with that I don't think you guys did hint on was you are able to then gauge where that student is that day, because you're able to see what kind of body language are they carrying when they walk towards you. Do they look like they've got this big rain cloud hanging over their head and they're shuffling their feet and they're just, the world is on their shoulders? Or are they, bebopping down the hallway like so excited to see you? I actually had students transfer into my classes because I did this. Because every once in a while I would be giving all my students high five as they came in the classroom. And so I would start having random students in the hallway come over just to give me a high five because they were craving that adult attention. So you can become somebody very special in those students' lives by making sure every one of your students gets attention from you every single day. So that was my Higashi Elementary. I have another kind of, it's really a sad story, and it was really a game changer for me as a teacher. It was my second to last national convention that I attended with students. So this would have been 2008. And I was really proud of the group of students I had because at this school, I was in a suburb of Kansas City. It was a new program that I had started, and I had a very diverse group of students that were reflective of the demographics in the school. So on my bus to national convention, I had several students of color, Latino, Black, mixed. I had a little bit of everything. I had a student with autism who went with us. I had several students with several different learning disabilities. So I had a very wide group of students, and I was really proud of my students that I had. We get to national convention, and I'm staying in a hotel, and it was our second to last day at convention. And two of my freshman girls who are mixed, they had one Black and one white parent. They come up to me and they said, "Miss Thieman, what's a jungle bunny?" And I don't know if you're familiar, I can't see your facial expressions to know if you're familiar with that term, but it is a racial slur, and it's a very old racial slur that is not very often used outside of the Deep South. And so I had to explain that to them. And I had to see them cry. And the reason they were asking me what that term meant is there were some FFA members from Kentucky who were sharing the hotel with us who had called them jungle bunnies. They thought it was a cute term. I think they were thinking along the lines of like Playboy bunnies. And so they had equated it with something that wasn't bad. So I had to be the one to tell them that it was not something good. The rest of my students knew about it. When I finally got a hold of the Kentucky students' teachers, what do you think their reaction was?
I feel like they probably just laughed it off.
Essentially, they blamed my students. And they said, well, we had a talk with our students about diversity before we left. And I said, well, apparently I'm not doing my job because I did not have a talk with my students about diversity and the fact that they could expect to hear racial slurs from other FFA members. I did as much damage control as I could with the students and their parents. National FFA even got a hold of that story and were personally contacted me. I then found out that soon after, one of these teachers was nominated for the Kentucky Teacher of the Year. So I was very frustrated. I was very upset. Any thoughts on what that did to the student demographics in my chapter after that?
Probably plummeted. Like, kids were discouraged to go, like, join because of, they don't want to be part of an organization that.
Yeah. So all of that hard work that I had done for inclusivity was lost. I was able to retain some of the students in the class, but I did not have any more students of color going on FFA trips. They didn't want to be involved in the FFA at all, because to them that became a very, very bad experience. Why do you think I tell you this story?
I think that we get so worked up about being positive about FFA that we don't realize that bad things like this can still happen. Like, we don't realize we're in our bubble of positive experiences that happen at our school, and we don't realize that this can still happen.
You just led me to my next point, so bravo, excellent. So I've got some numbers for you to write down. So there's, Dr. Foster, I'm going to send you a link to an article so you all can actually see the numbers and not just hear them. There we go.
If you wouldn't mind also, you could kick it out to our Twitter hashtag as well. Oh, you want me to open it up on the screen in front of them? I see.
Yeah, and I will do that. I'll do the Twitter hashtag afterward. Okay, so I'll go ahead and kind of give you the rundown of the numbers that I find of interest. So this was released this past summer in June, and it's on NPR. It is so for the past, since 1968, the federal government has been sending the U.S. public schools a survey to gauge educational access and enforce civil rights law. So what we found is that the U.S. Department of Education released the 2013-2014. So this is from a couple of years ago because it takes that long to analyze all this data. They had more than 95,000 schools and 50 million students. So some particular numbers to pay attention to. 49.7% of public school students are students of color. So we are almost at parity. 24.7% Hispanic or Latino of any race. This one I want you to write down. 15.5% Black or African American. So write that one down. Then just, for other points of conversation, 6.5 million students missed 15 days of schools or more. That's 13% of all students and 18% of all high school students. So how is chronic absenteeism related to inclusion?
If a student does not feel valued and welcomed in their own classroom, I feel like it's so much harder for them to get up every day and show up.
Yeah. My goal as a teacher was to be the reason that students came to school. I wanted to be and for some students, it ended up I was the only reason they came to school. I had students that I would have my kids in their little FFA jackets ready to go on a trip, And I distinctly remember having a teacher ready for national convention, having a math teacher, come across the hallway to my room to say in front of my students, "I can't believe you're taking Zach on a trip with you." In front of my students. And I said, I actually don't have any problem.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Nope.
What happened? You got anything yet?
Okay. Can you hear us? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear us. All right, so audio's going through us. This is new. All right, let's see if we can figure it out. We're gonna go into settings. I'm gonna go to play test sound. That is totally not her. I'm gonna move it to the speaker.
Can you hear me yet?
Yeah.
So I changed it to our microphone speaker instead of the overhead. Who knows what happened?
Well, I also pushed mute and turned my camera off and then turned them back on, so there's no telling what happened.
But we hear it now. We're just got to be a little bit more cautious. Feel free to move up closer to the room if you need to, and we're going to keep on rocking it out.
Okay, so I said I wanted to be the reason that my students came to school, and I was getting my kids ready for national convention one day. They're all adorable little freshmen standing there in their FFA jackets, and I had a math teacher come across the hallway, and she said to me, "I can't believe you are taking Zach on a trip." And Zach was a student of mine who happened to be on my, and you can flip it back to camera, Dr. Foster.
Okay. Go ahead.
Zach was on my trap shooting team. Zach did have a few problems because he was severely ADHD, but his parents were divorced. His mom would make sure he had his medication. His dad would not give him his medication, so his performance in class was directly related to who he was staying with at the time. So he was rough, but I didn't have any real problems with him that were not related to his ADHD. So I tell her, I said, "Well, I honestly don't have any problems with him. Why don't you just be glad he's not in your class?" And she kind of her jaw dropped, and I said, "You can leave now." And she left because I did not tolerate anybody talking about my students negatively. It's one thing if you're sharing a problem you're having with a student, it's another to be down-talking students. Okay, so back to our numbers. So we just wrote down 15.5% of our students are Black and African American. Okay, so here's a couple more numbers we're going to look at. These are national FFA. So I want you to write down 629,367. That is the total number of FFA members currently, or at least the most current I could find on FFA's website. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to find it or not, but you usually have to do some digging to find this information. So the next number I'd like you to write down is from National FFA's website. There are 8% of the members who are Black, African American, or American Indian. So it wraps up quite a bit there. So can somebody do the calculation for me on how many students that would be if 8% of the FFA members are Black, African American, or American Indian?
About 50,000.
Okay. So I come out with 50,349. So I want you to write that down. So that's current. students who are Black, African American, or American Indian in the FFA nationally? Who in here is familiar with the New Farmers of America?
All of us.
Everyone. Awesome.
They had
You guys have Blaney Bowen, right?
well, Blaney didn't come this year. It's Dr. Baggett, Dr. Connie
Oh,
Baggett.
Connie. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So how many NFA members were there before the merger with FFA?
58,000 in 1965.
Huh?
There were 58,000 in 1965 for the merger, but there were more than that 2 years prior.
Uh-huh. So write that number down. 1965, 58,000.
So the year of the merger, what you found, Katie, was 58,000.
Why do I bring that up?
The number hasn't really changed or gone up since 1965.
Decreased. So if I'm somebody who's like into statistics, if a proportion of people involved in something decreases, what natural assumption would I make about the larger population?
It would decrease.
That it was also decreasing. Have the number of African American, Black, and American Indian people combined in the United States decreased since 1965 as a proportion of our population? No, they've actually increased because what percentage of our school students are students of color? 49.7. So what's going on?
We're not inclusive.
I think we can clearly say that there's an inclusion problem. If we look at students with disabilities, we will find the same thing. That's another part of my research that I work on is special education students. They're overrepresented in ag education classrooms, but are they overrepresented in the FFA? So we have I think we have some inclusivity issues that we need to face when it comes to the FFA. And I bring that up to you because as ag teachers, you are the gatekeepers for the FFA. Raise your hand if you personally had a positive experience with FFA, if FFA made you a better person. A lot of us. Raise your hand if you've heard of people who FFA has made a positive difference for them in their lives. Okay, so as teachers, if we believe that FFA can make a positive difference in students' lives, why would we not put all of our effort into making sure that as many students as possible get this awesome experience? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why some ag teachers are exclusive, if you will, if they have exclusivity, where there's only a certain type of student that they encourage and allow to participate. So I think, the reason I bring up the FFA statistics and the NPR story is just to point to that need. We have a need to really work on inclusion, because if we do not work on inclusion, the proportion of students of color are going to continue to grow in the United States. Where is FFA and ag education going to be left if we do not work on inclusion?
In the past,
Will we still exist 20 years from now? 50 years from now? I don't know. If we continue on the path of not practicing inclusion in our classrooms, I think we're going to start having some problems, because school boards and school districts and administrators are not going to be okay with classrooms being not representative. So that brings me to the next point, in that our expectations shape performance and behaviors of others. So I want you to turn to your neighbor real quick and talk to them about this point. Our expectations shape the performance and behaviors of others. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk. So talk to a neighbor about that point, whether you believe it or not.
Why would I try to
We explained it more. We don't need expectations.
Yeah, if you don't get expectations.
Succeeding.
Yeah.
Okay, wrap up your thoughts. Okay, so what do we think of that statement?
It's true.
Why do you say it's true?
Because when someone like knows what you expect of them, like if you have someone that like everyone's like, oh, it's that kid, like he's the one that always goofs off, like they have no reason to change because they're already known as like that kid. So like that becomes their identity.
Mm-hmm. Anybody disagree with the statement? Or at least they're not willing to say they are, right?
I definitely think it's true. I know I definitely experienced that myself in high school. Depending on the teacher and what they expected out of us, that definitely oftentimes reflected the amount of time or effort I put into work. Like I had a teacher who really challenged us and believed in us and told us that we can do these hard assignments that he gave us, and took to that challenge and was able to meet his goals. Whereas if a teacher doesn't expect much out of us, I do shoddier work. Or at least I did in high school.
Definitely. Any other thoughts on it?
Well, I also think that when a teacher has expectations for the class, it's proof to the students that the teacher believes in them, and the teacher knows that they can do it. And with help from the teacher and from classmates, they can rise to the challenge and succeed in the class. And I think just that belief that the teacher instills in the students can help all of them achieve, anything they come by.
I had a very wise mentor who he ended up teaching for 33 years before he retired recently. He told me students will rise to your expectations no matter how high or low they are. Pretty deep, huh? So what happens if we have low expectations for students?
They
There will be low output from their end. They won't try as hard and they won't care.
It will be rare that a student will try to exceed your expectations. So think about that. I'm going to send you guys a link, and it'll be in my blog post that I do for you afterward, that I think will it usually rocks people's worlds, in that it answers the question, can a blind person who physically has no eyes see? So can a blind person who has no eyes see?
No.
Okay. Why?
I think they physically can't see, but I think inside of them they can feel. And so, in a sense, that feeling or that openness or that acceptance is seeing in a different light, even if there isn't any light, maybe?
I mean see. I mean have visual images in their brain.
I think that they create an image in their brain of what they think it should look like.
I think it depends on if they were born without vision or not.
No, they can't. They can't actually see because they don't have eyes.
But can't they still imagine?
Not if they've never seen images before.
Okay. So what you are displaying perfectly for me is if you had a blind student, you would have the expectation that they could not see. And science has actually proven this wrong. Yes. Through brain imaging, blind people who develop an echolocation system similar to what bats use, if you put an object, I think the example given was a teacup on a saucer. If you put that in front of a blind person who has echolocation, who has developed echolocation, and you put that teacup and saucer in front of a sighted person who has eyeballs, who can see, what happens in the brain? The exact same thing. So they are able to see, like have a visual image of the teacup and saucer that is identical to the one that the person who is sighted sees. Now, color isn't there, but if you rule out, well, if they can't see color, then they can't actually see, then you're telling me that people with eyeballs who have varying forms of color blindness also can't see. So I'll post the link for that. It's a podcast, and there's also an actual article you can read. I encourage you listen to the entire podcast because it's really, really amazing. And the difference is that the mother of this blind man, I believe his name is Daniel, he did not place limitations on him when he was a child. She let him climb trees. She let him ride a bike. When he developed his echolocation, which was he would click with his tongue and then the sound waves would bounce back and he was able to figure out what was in front of him and around him. When the school told her that his echolocation clicking was disruptive to the classroom, she told them, well, I don't really care how you feel about that because that is something that he has to do to live. So it's a really interesting kind of opinion altering piece that I encourage everyone to check out. So then that brings us to bias. So we all have bias. Bias gets in the way of inclusion. And bias gets in the way of inclusion, especially when we do not recognize that we have bias. Has anyone heard of the Harvard Implicit Associations test?
Yes.
Okay. Has everyone heard of it or just one person?
Just one person.
Okay.
Allison's scoring extra points today.
So I challenge every single one of you to take a good hard look at yourself and your own bias by taking several of these tests. You probably are not going to like the results. It does not say anything about you being a good or bad person. What it shows is that your background, your experiences up to this point, your family, the town you grew up in, the schools you went to, the people you have surrounded yourself with shape your opinions and beliefs about people. Whether you want to or not, what you hear around you impacts you. So take the implicit association test. You can take it on everything from spirituality to skin color to, I think, political persuasion. I mean, they have everything on there. I encourage you to take a good hard look at yourself and your own bias, because as a teacher, if you have biases, it will impact how you interact with students. The way it impacts your interactions with students is non-verbally. We are not very good at controlling all of our non-verbal body language. What percentage of communication is done non-verbally with humans?
Like 75%.
75%? Is that what I heard? Yeah, and I've even heard it as high as 84, because it's more than just the words we say. So if you are uncomfortable with a student who is different, they will be able to read it. The other students will be able to read it. This relates to my research, because one of the projects I do is I put heart rate monitors on students when they are having an intercultural interaction. So I'm having students interact with somebody who is from a different culture than their own, and I look at their stress and anxiety levels throughout that interaction. What do you think we find is one of the most significant factors in reducing that anxiety of being around somebody different? How do you reduce fear and anxiety of people who are different than you?
Finding something in common.
Finding something in common, absolutely. So what we do is we have them talk to each other 3 different times. Spending authentic time where you're having real conversations with different people will change how you view other people. As future teachers, I encourage you to look at your circle of friends and the circle of people that you spend most of your time with. If they all look, feel, believe, act like you, I encourage you to broaden your horizons a little bit and find somebody different. Maybe it's finding somebody who's in a wheelchair and spending some time with them and getting to know them. Maybe it's finding something from a different ethnic background, different religious background. Really examine who you are and who you interact with, because the more you broaden that, the more students you will be able to effectively teach, because you can effectively communicate with them and you will be able to interact with them in a way that is positive. Research is very clear that positive interactions with students is one of the most important things in making them feel included in a classroom. So you have to get to know them and you have to be comfortable with them. If that student in a wheelchair picks up through nonverbal signals that you are uncomfortable with them, they're not going to be feeling included in your classroom. And the thing about stress and anxiety when we're not comfortable is, what does our heart do? Huh?
It's faster.
It beats faster. Yes, it increases in rate and it also becomes more erratic. So your heart rate is all over the place. It's bouncing around. Every time your heart beats, it sends out an electromagnetic signal. That signal is, I want you to put your elbows out to your side and stick your arms out. Everybody, if you were to make us, yeah, stick your hands straight out from your side. Everyone within that circle can pick up on your heartbeat.
What?
Yeah.
Said everybody within your circle can pick up on your heartbeat.
That's great.
So if you're a teacher and you're next to a student who you are uncomfortable around, do you think that student can pick it up?
Yes.
Yes. And what will their heart start doing?
Increase.
It'll start increasing and it'll get more erratic and it will cause them to become anxious. And it will escalate between the two of you. So it is absolutely essential that you gain experiences with people who are different, because that will help you overcome that anxiety, that intercultural anxiety. If you don't know where to start, ask people you know if they know anybody who's different. Just start talking to people who are different than you. I know it can be kind of scary, but most people are pretty nice. Okay, so another strategy.
Before Dr. Thieman goes on, you'll never have a better opportunity than now on a university campus to find people that are different from you. What's interesting is that once you graduate from college, people tend to go to very monocultural situations most of the time. So this is your best opportunity to stretch yourself.
I challenge you to do better than the average college student. There are recent studies that show that the average college student isolates themselves in their college experience to the point that they leave college valuing diversity less than when they entered college. Okay, so being student-centered. And one of you, I can't remember who, brought this up when we were talking about control. Who do you think ran my FFA chapter banquets? The students. Why did I let the students do it?
It's a student-run organization.
It's a student-run organization, not teacher-run. I'm an advisor. I'm there to step in if things are going awry or if I have suggestions for them. They wrote their scripts. They ordered the plaques. They ordered the food. They sent out invitations. They made the program. And so how does that help inclusion?
They have to work with each other in order to accomplish it.
And they're gonna do what they like. They're not gonna be doing what I think they like. And so that goes for meetings, that goes for banquets, and it's hard to give up that control. But they're not going to learn if you don't do that. What else is there? So I will end with this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Figure out what works for you to get to know your students and show them you care. For me, one of the best ways I did that outside of greeting them at the door every day was I had bell work for the first 2 weeks of class that had questions that allowed me to get to know them. Everything from what's the single thing that has had the greatest impact on their life to this point, to what do they want to be when they grow up. And I would always share my own answer. Building a relationship is a two-way street. You must give something up to gain something. So you have to share who you are with your students in order for them to share who they are. Okay, I think we have maybe a minute or two for questions if anyone has anything specific.
We do have some very excited folks. Cheyenne, how about you go first?
Hi, I'm Cheyenne. So when you talked about inclusion from the teachers and students aspect, the inclusion issue, do you think it's more from a teacher aspect of not being comfortable with more diversity in their student body, or do you think it's more from the students not feeling included, welcome, or comfortable with the teachers?
Well, students aren't going to feel welcome and comfortable if the teachers aren't making them feel welcome and comfortable. So to me, I'm about locus of control. I cannot control my students. I can control myself. So what I can control is working hard to learn more about myself and to do the hard work in the deep digging that is involved in learning my bias to make me a better teacher. Does that answer your question?
Remember, she can't hear head nods, so
Yeah.
she said
I'm
yes.
like thinking about it. Well, yeah.
But we do have the opportunity to dictate that environment of learning. That is the responsibility of the teacher, but what you accept that occurred in that environment. So there's really some things there to, what is your locus of control, as Dr. Thieman shared. I'm going to go with Katie, and then we're going to come back to Kurt and then to Rose.
Hi, my name is Katie. My question is about religion. So I've noticed in a lot of state officer programs or even national officers that religion specific to Christianity is brought up, and it's brought up very heavily. In your opinion,
what should be done about that? Because I know, I'm a member and I am a Christian, but there's a time and a place, and I do not think it is in the Blue Jacket.
Oh, you open up a can of worms with that one, because I even find at the post-secondary level in our professional organizations, I find Christianity forced down my throat. I don't agree with it. I think it's very wrong, especially in the United States. When we look at the reason this country, that immigrants started coming to this country, religious freedom, I think it's okay to give people a moment for reflection. I do not think it's okay to refer to a specific God, because that is putting a specific religion on your students. I have had Muslim and Hindu students, and it makes them very uncomfortable. They tolerate it because they have to in the US, but I don't feel it's my job as a teacher to be a spiritual guide for my students. They have the opportunity to reflect and pray if they want to, but I'm not going to interject that into my public school activities, because we have a separation of church and state, and I take that very seriously.
Thank you for sharing. Kurt and then Rose, this will be your last two questions.
Hi, so my question is, being that FFA is a student-run organization, at what point do you try to guide your students to be inclusive as well? Because they have their own biases. They're also affecting interest in the chapter as well, and they're driving their peers to make a decision about joining FFA.
I had a pretty strong zero tolerance policy for language that was not inclusive for my students, language or actions, and I had no problem calling students out for that. But the big thing is students follow your lead. So if you demonstrate that you don't tolerate students making comments that are sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever, they will mimic you, and they will not allow other students to do the same. So I find being an example is one of the best things you can do. And when you're recruiting students, try to do your best to have a representative group of students of the group that you want to have. So make sure you get your students of color and both young men and women involved, different ability statuses, things like that. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you. And Rose, you'll finish us off with your question.
Hi, my name is Rose, and my question is, so how do you go about reaching and developing relationships with students like in your school that maybe you don't have like day-to-day contact with, but they still should be represented in your classes in FFA?
That's where I found like the hallway time really made a difference. Right now, in Illinois, we have a lot of Hispanic students, but we don't have a lot of Hispanic students in the FFA. So we are working on a Spanish creed contest to help with that, to make those students feel more included. I think just being present out in the school and asking your students to help you be an advocate in that, and talking with the counselors. The counselors in your school can be your best friend in encouraging students. So if you tell them, I'm really wanting to increase the diversity in my program, can you guys help me with that? They may have some strategies, and they may also directly recruit students for you.
Thank you.
Let's show our appreciation to our team. Erica, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and I know how valuable your time is, so I really appreciate you taking time to share that with us.
Yeah, I am off today to go present my research at the Illinois Association for School Administrators. So you guys might not know, but I do research on teacher stress, and so I'm gonna hopefully get out there and tell those administrators to quit stressing out our teachers.
They'll appreciate that. Thank you, Erica. Will you be at National FFA Convention?
I will not.
Then will you be at, I guess the next time I see you might be AAAE in May. So
Yeah, if you're not going to North Central, then
I'm not. I'm being a bum. So
man.
I look forward to interacting online. We'll talk to you later.
All right, bye. It was nice to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.